The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin as passengers boarded Flight 718 from Los Angeles to New York. It was aired-eye, and most people were visibly tired, dragging their carry-ons and searching for their seats with glazed eyes among the crowd. Was Keanu Reeves dressed in a simple black hoodie jeans and sneakers? His quiet demeanor and unassuming appearance made him blend in effortlessly. He settled into seat 32A in the economy section next to the window, gazing out as the ground crew finished. Loading the plane as the boarding continued, a tall, sharply dressed man in his late 40s appeared. His tailored suit, shiny shoes, and loud Bluetooth headset screamed corporate executive. His name was Roger, and he exuded the kind of confidence that came with years of privilege. He stopped abruptly when he saw his assigned seat, 32B, right next to Keanu. Roger sighed dramatically, looking around as if hoping to spot an empty first-class seat. Realizing he had no choice, he shoved his leather bag into the overhead compartment and dropped into his seat with an audible groan. Without looking at Keanu, he muttered, "Guess not everyone can afford first class, huh?" Keanu turned slightly, offering a polite smile. "Good evening, Roger," barely acknowledged him. Instead, he continued his grumbling, "Economy class, always cramped, always uncomfortable. And now I'm stuck here for 6 hours. Great." Keanu, unbothered, adjusted his seatbelt and returned his gaze to the window. He had heard it all before. He wasn't here for attention or comfort. He just wanted a quiet flight. Minutes later, the flight attendants completed their final checks. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the flight's departure as the plane taxied to the runway. Roger's complaints grew louder. He leaned toward Keanu, gesturing at his clothes. "You know," Roger started, "people always say you should dress for success. But looking at you, I guess that rule doesn't apply to everyone." Keanu, still calm, replied simply, "Comfort over style for long flights." Roger chuckled mockingly. "Sure, buddy, let me guess you're an artist, a writer, or just between jobs?" Keanu gave a soft laugh but didn't respond, choosing to focus on the book he had pulled from his bag. This only seemed to irritate Roger. Further, as the plane climbed to cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed. A peaceful quiet began to settle in, except for Roger, who continued his monologue about the superiority of first-class amenities. "I mean, in first class, you get real food, privacy, and actual legroom, not like this cattle car. Have you ever even flown first class?" Keanu closed his book and turned to Roger, smiling gently. "Actually, I have, but sometimes simplicity is nice." Roger scoffed. "Simplicity, that's just code for can't afford. Come on, man, admit it. If you had the money, you wouldn't be sitting back here." Keanu tilted his head thoughtfully. "Maybe, but money doesn't buy everything." The response seemed to irritate Roger further, spoken like someone who's never had it. "Let me tell you, money solves a lot of problems, and sitting back here with people who can't even afford a decent pair of shoes isn't my idea of a good time at that moment." Keanu glanced down at his sneakers and chuckled lightly. "They're comfortable," he said. Simply. Roger leaned back in his seat, shaking his head. Unbelievable. The tension between the two passengers didn't go unnoticed by others. Nearby, some passengers exchanged curious glances, while a flight attendant hovering nearby seemed ready to intervene. But Keanu's calm demeanor diffused the situation, and soon Roger ran out of steam. At least for the moment. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the flight attendants began their beverage service. Roger, still in his self-appointed role as the most important person on the flight, ordered a scotch and loudly insisted it be served with exactly 2 ice cubes. Keanu quietly asked for water, thanking the flight attendant with a kind smile when the drinks arrived. Roger took a sip of his scotch and sneered. "And this is why I usually stick to first class. Even the drinks back here taste cheap." Keanu, still composed, sipped his water and returned to his book. But despite his outward calm, something about the situation gwed at him. He wasn't one to judge or hold grudges, but Roger's behavior felt like a test of patience as the flight continued. Turbulence began to rock the plane lightly. Passengers held onto their armrests as the seatbelt sign dinged on. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The turbulence grew stronger, and the cabin filled with nervous murmurs. Roger's bravado quickly faded as he gripped the armrests, his face pale. He turned to Keanu, who remained composed despite the bumpy ride. You don't seem worried." Roger stammered, his earlier arrogance replaced with fear. Keanu glanced at him and offered a reassuring smile, panicking. "Doesn't help. The crew knows what they're doing." Suddenly a loud jolt rocked the plane and the overhead lights flickered. Gasps filled the cabin as the plane dipped slightly. The captain's voice returned, this time more urgent. "We're experiencing severe turbulence. Please remain calm and follow the instructions." Of our crew, passengers gripped their seats, some whispering prayers, others struggling to maintain composure. Roger, now visibly shaking, looked at Keanu with wide eyes. What if something happens? What if we don't make it? Keanu's voice remained. "Steady, breathe, stay calm. Panic only makes things worse at that moment." The plane shook again, sending drink cups and belongings. Flying, a baby's cry pierced the tent. Silence, and a few passengers screamed. Keanu unbuckled his seatbelt, slightly looking around to assess the situation. And then the story takes a turn. If you're still here, I know you're as curious as Roger about what happens next. Will the turbulence subside? What role will Keanu play in this chaos? If you think something unexpected is about to happen, drop a 1 in the comments right now, trust me. You don't want to miss the next part of this story. The plane trembled again, more violently. This time passengers clung to their seats and overhead compartments rattled ominously. Items not secured properly tumbled to the floor, amplifying the panic. The captain's voice returned, calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered unexpected turbulence due to a storm system. We're diverting to an alternate airport for safety. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Despite the announcement, the atmosphere in the cabin was far from calm. A woman a few rows ahead struggled to soothe her crying baby, while an elderly man frantically pressed the call button for assistance. Whispers of fear rippled through the rows. Roger turned to Keanu, his earlier arrogance completely replaced by visible fear. "This can't be normal, right? Planes aren't supposed to shake like this, Keanu." His voice, steady, responded. "It's not ideal, but planes are built to handle turbulence. Focus on your breathing. It'll help." Roger's hands trembled as he fumbled to adjust his seatbelt. "Easy for you to say. You're just sitting there like it's no big deal." Keanu looked him in the eye, his tone reassuring. "Panicking won't change what's happening. Trust the crew, they've trained for situations like this." The plane jolted again, and a flight attendant, stumbling slightly, moved down the aisle to address the growing unrest. "Everyone, please remain calm. We're trained to ensure your safety. If you need assistance, press your call button." But her words barely registered amidst the chaos. Passengers shouted over each other, some demanding answers, others praying aloud. Keanu unbuckled his seatbelt cautiously and stood steadying himself against the swaying cabin. "Sir, please remain seated," the flight attendant urged, her voice edged with concern. Keanu nodded calmly. "I understand, but I think I can help." He approached the elderly man, pressing his call button repeatedly. The man's breathing was shallow, his face pale. I can't breathe," he gasped. Keanu knelt beside him, speaking softly. "Sir, you're having a panic attack. Look at me. Breathe in slowly through your nose. That's it, now out through your mouth." The man's breaths, though shaky, began to stabilize. A woman seated next to him whispered, "Thank you, I didn't know what to do." Keanu smiled faintly. "You're doing great. Just keep him calm." Back at his seat, Roger was gripping his armrests so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He watched Keanu move with purpose, helping passengers with a calmness that seemed almost surreal. When Keanu returned, Roger grabbed his arm. "What are you doing? You're not a flight attendant. You're not even qualified." Keanu interrupted him, his voice firm but kind. "Sometimes it's not about qualifications. It's about keeping people calm." Roger blinked momentarily, speechless. He glanced around the cabin, where passengers were visibly calming down thanks to Keanu's composed demeanor, but his own fear remained overpowering. A sharp crack echoed through the cabin, followed by a low mechanical groan. The plane lurched violently, and the oxygen masks deployed with a hiss. Gasps of shock filled the air as passengers scrambled. To secure their masks, put your mask on first, Keanu instructed Roger, demonstrating as he secured his own. Roger's hands shook as he fumbled with the elastic band, but Keanu helped him pull it over his head through the mask. Roger muttered, "This is it, isn't it? We're going to crash." Keanu placed a steadying hand on Roger's shoulder. "Listen to me, planes don't just fall out of the sky. The pilots are doing everything they can to get us on the ground safely. Trust them." As the cabin lights flickered, the flight attendants moved swiftly, checking passengers and ensuring everyone had their masks on. Keanu noticed a young girl across the aisle struggling with her mother trying unsuccessfully to help. Without hesitation, he unbuckled again and crossed over. "Let me help," Keanu said softly, adjusting the girl's mask until it fits snugly over her face. The mother looked at him with tearful gratitude. Thank you so much." Roger's perspective shifts watching Keanu move through the cabin. Roger felt a strange mix of awe and shame. He had spent the first half of the flight belittling this man, assuming him to be nothing more than an unimportant nobody. But now, as fear paralyzed most of the passengers, Keanu was stepping up, showing courage and compassion when it mattered most. Roger couldn't help but mutter to himself, "Who is this guy?" The turbulence worsened and the plane dipped suddenly, eliciting a collective scream. Keanu returned to his seat, gripping the armrest as the aircraft leveled out again. Roger, shaking, blurted out, "If we survive this, I swear I'll never fly economy again." Keanu chuckled softly, his voice muffled by the oxygen mask. "Maybe surviving will give you a different perspective." Before Roger could respond, the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but tense. "This is your captain speaking. We've initiated an emergency descent to the nearest airport. Flight attendants, prepare the sea cabin for landing." The announcement sent another ripple of panic through the cabin, but Keanu's steady presence continued to reassure those around him. He turned to Roger, who looked on the verge of hyperventilating again. "Roger, look at me," Keanu said firmly. "We're going to be okay. Focus on your breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. You've got this." Roger hesitated, then followed Keanu's lead slowly. His breathing steadied and some of the color returned to his face. The plane's descent was anything but smooth, but the crew managed to keep it under control as the wheels touched down with a jarring thud. A cheer erupted from the passengers. Relief washed over the cabin like a tidal wave. Keanu leaned back in his seat, exhaling deeply. Roger, still clutching the armrests, glanced at him with a newfound respect. You really kept it together back there." Keanu shrugged modestly. "It's all about staying calm and helping where you can." Roger nodded slowly, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine humility. "I owe you an apology, and maybe—" "Thank you," Keanu smiled. "No apology necessary. Just remember, everyone's fighting a battle you don't see. Be kind. It costs nothing." As the plane rolled to stop on the emergency runway, the cabin erupted in applause. The tension that had gripped the passengers during the descent finally gave way to relief. People looked at each other, sharing smiles and nods of reassurance. Despite the chaos, everyone was safe, thanks to the skill of the flight crew and the calm, quiet leadership of an unassuming man in seat 32A. The flight attendants began moving through the aisles, checking on passengers and preparing for disembarkation. Keanu remained seated quietly, observing the scene around him. Roger, still gripping the armrests, let out a shaky laugh. "Well, that was something," he muttered, his voice tinged with embarrassment. Keanu turned to him with a small smile. "We made it, that's what matters." Roger looked at Keanu, his earlier bravado completely gone. "I have to admit I didn't handle that well. You were like a rock. How do you stay so calm under pressure?" Keanu shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "I've learned that panic doesn't solve anything. It only makes things harder for everyone. Staying calm helps me think clearly. And it helps others stay calm too." Roger nodded slowly, absorbing the words. He glanced around the cabin, noticing for the first time how many passengers were looking at Keanu. With gratitude in their eyes, it was clear that his quiet actions had made a difference. Once the plane was safely parked and the doors opened, passengers began gathering their belongings. A flight attendant approached Keanu with a warm smile. "Thank you for your help back there." she said. "You really made a difference." Keanu nodded politely. "Just doing what I could, Roger." Overhearing the exchange felt a pang of guilt. He had spent most of the flight mocking this man, only to realize how wrong he had been. As they exited the plane together, Roger cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hey," he began hesitantly. "I just wanted to say, sorry for how I acted earlier. I was out of line." Keanu looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "It's okay, we all have our moments, no. Really, Roger insisted I was a jerk. I judged you without knowing anything about you. And then you went and, well, basically, saved the day feeling like an idiot." Keanu's smile was kind but understated. It's easy to make assumptions, but it's also easy to choose kindness. Instead, Roger couldn't help but marvel at the simplicity of Keanu's response. "You're a better man than," he admitted with a chuckle. Keanu shook his head. "We all have room to grow." The passengers were escorted to the airport lounge while the airline arranged alternative flights. People milled about, some still shaken by the ordeal, others eager to share their stories with loved ones. Keanu found a quiet corner and pulled out his book content to wait patiently. Roger, however, couldn't shake the K&E to know more about the man who had sat next to him. He approached cautiously, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" Keanu gestured to the seat across from him. "Go ahead." Roger set one of the cups in front of Keanu. "It's not scotch with exactly 2 ice cubes, but it'll have to do." Keanu chuckled softly, accepting the coffee. "Thanks." For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Roger spoke, his tone reflective. "You said earlier that money doesn't buy everything. I think I get what you meant now. All my money didn't mean a thing up there, but you stayed calm. Helped people. That's worth more than anything I've ever done." Keanu sipped his coffee, considering his words. It's not about comparing. Everyone has something to offer. Sometimes it's just about being present in the moment. Frowned slightly. "You make it sound so easy. It's not always easy," Keanu admitted, "but it's worth trying." As they talked, a murmur spread through the lounge. Several passengers began glancing in their direction, whispering excitedly. Roger looked around, confused. What's going on? A young boy approached cautiously, holding a smartphone. "Excuse me, are you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smiled gently and nodded. "Yes." "I am." The boy's face lit up. "I knew it. Told my mom it was you. Can I take a picture with you?" Keanu glanced at the boy's mother, who was standing nearby, looking equally excited. "Of course," he said warmly as the boy posed for the photo. More passengers began to gather, their whispers turning into exclamations of recognition. "It is him. I can't believe we were on the same flight. No wonder he was so calm." Roger's jaw dropped as realization dawned. "You're Keanu Reeves, the..." "Keanu Reeves." Keanu chuckled softly. "That's what they tell me." Roger leaned back in his seat, shaking his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable. I sat next to you for 6 hours and spent half the time acting like a complete fool." Keanu's expression remained kind. "It's okay, Roger, now." You know, as the excitement in the lounge died down, Roger turned to Keanu with a sheepish grin. "I think I owe you more than an apology. I owe you dinner or a drink, or both." Keanu smiled. "No need, but if you want to pay it forward, find a way to help someone else." Roger nodded, his expression serious. "I will, and..." I mean that they sat in companionable silence for a moment before Roger spoke again. "You know, I've spent my whole life chasing success, money, status, the best of everything. And yet in a moment of real crisis, none of it mattered. Your right, kindness. Costs nothing, but it's worth everything." Keanu looked at him thoughtfully. "That's a lesson I've learned too, and it's one worth sharing." As the airline announced the passengers' new flight arrangements, Roger and Keanu prepared to part ways. Roger extended his hand and Keanu shook it firmly. "Thank you," Roger said earnestly, "for everything. I won't forget it." Keanu nodded, his smile genuine. "Take care, Roger. Safe travels." As they went their separate ways, Roger couldn't help but feel like he'd gained more than just a story to tell. He'd gained a new perspective, a reminder that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in character and compassion. And as for Keanu, he simply returned to his quiet, unassuming self, ready to face whatever the journey ahead might bring. The airport buzzed with activity as Keanu walked toward his gate. His steps unhurried. He noticed how passengers occasionally glanced at him, whispering and pointing. Though he was accustomed to the attention, it never ceased to amaze him. How small acts of kindness often carried more weight than fame. Roger, now assigned to a different gate, sat in the corner of the lounge. Deep in thought, he replayed the events of the flight in his mind. His own panicked outbursts, the moments of chaos, and how Keanu's calmness had not only steadied the cabin, but also humbled him for years. Roger had defined success by stay-stews, money, and material possessions. But in those turbulent moments, it became clear how fragile those things really were. Keanu's peaceful stroll was interrupted by a voice nearby. "Excuse me, sir, can you help me?" Turning, he saw a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, struggling with a heavy stroller while trying to calm a fussy toddler. Her face was flushed with frustration as she juggled the demands of travel and parenting without hesitation. Keanu approached her. "Here, let me get that," he said, lifting the stroller with ease. The woman sighed with relief. "Thank you so much. I thought I'd be stuck here forever." "No problem," Keanu replied, his tone warm. "Traveling with kids isn't easy." The woman smiled gratefully. "You don't know the half of it. My son and I have been traveling for nearly 12 hours. He's exhausted, and so am I." Keanu crouched to the toddler's level and offered a friendly smile. "Hey there, buddy. It's been a long day, huh?" The little boy, though shy, nodded and clutched a toy airplane tightly. Keanu straightened and turned back to the mother. "Let me help you to your gate." "You don't have to," she started to protest. But Keanu waved her off. "Really, it's no trouble." As they walked, passengers nearby watched the scene unfold. Some recognized Keanu, their eyes widening in admiration as they whispered to one another. Others simply saw a kind man helping a struggling mother. Roger, who had been watching from a distance, couldn't believe his eyes. Even after everything that had happened, Keanu was still out there, offering a helping hand without expecting anything in return. Roger felt a pang of guilt, but also a spark of inspiration. He stood up, straightened hasty, and made his way to the nearest coffee stand as he ordered. He overheard a barista apologizing profusely to an elderly customer whose coffee had spilled. "I'm so sorry, sir," the barista said nervously. "Let me make you another one." The elderly man, leaning heavily on his cane, waved her off. "It's fine, dear. I'll take care of it." Roger stepped in. "Actually, I've got this." He smiled at the barista. "Add another coffee to the order for me, please." The elderly man blinked in surprise. "You don't have to do that." Roger shook his head. "Consider it my way of paying it forward." As the barista prepared their drinks, Roger struck up a conversation with the man. He learned that his name was Walter, and he was traveling to visit his grandson for the first time in years, you know. Walter said, his voice trembling slightly. "People don't often go out of their way to help strangers. It means a lot." Roger smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. "It's the least I can do." Meanwhile, Keanu continued helping the young mother until she reached her gate. She thanked him profusely, and he wished her a safe flight before heading back to his own gate. As he sat down, pulling out his book once again, a familiar voice called out, "Well, look who it is." Keanu looked up to see Roger standing there holding 2 cups of coffee. Has smiled. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." Roger chuckled and handed him one of the cups. "Consider this my way of saying thanks for everything." Keanu accepted the coffee with a nod of appreciation. "You didn't have to do that." "But thank you." Roger sat down across from him, his expression more open than it had been earlier. "I saw you helping that woman. You didn't have to do that either, but you did." Keanu shrugged lightly. "Sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference." Roger nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "You've got a way of making people feel like they matter. That's rare." "It shouldn't be," Keanu replied, "but maybe it can be contagious." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics. Travel plans, favorite books, and life experiences. Roger found himself opening up in a way he hadn't done in years, sharing stories about his family, his career, and the moments that had shaped him. Keanu listened attentively, offering insights and anecdotes of his own, though he rarely spoke about his personal life. He shared enough to connect with Roger on a deeper level as their boarding announcements echoed through the lounge. Roger hesitated. I don't say this often, but meeting you has been eye-opening. I think it needed this." Keanu smiled warmly. "We all need reminders sometimes. Take care of yourself, Roger, you too." Roger said, extending his hand. They shook firmly, a silent understanding passing between them as Roger boarded his flight. He felt lighter as, though the weight of his own ego had been lifted, he found his seat and settled in, his mind racing with thoughts about how he could carry this newfound perspective into his daily life. Keanu, back in his own seat on a different plane, gazed out the window as the engines roared to life. He thought about the people he had encountered that day. The frightened passengers, the young mother, and Roger. Each interaction was a reminder of the power of small acts of kindness to ripple, outward touching lives in unexpected ways back home. Roger began to make changes. He reached out to old friends he'd neglected, spent more time with his family, and found ways to give back to his community. Though he never considered himself a kindness guru, he carried Keanu's lessons with him, letting them shape the way he approached life. As for Keanu, he continued to live as he always had, quietly, humbly, and with a deep sense of compassion. He never sought recognition for his actions, but his impact was undeniable. Sometimes it's the simplest gestures that leave the most profound marks, and in the turbulence of life, a steady hand and a kind heart can guide us all to safer ground. Roger's life took on a renewed focus after his chance encounter with Keanu Reeves. The lessons from that turbulent flight had sunk deeper than he initially realized, and they began manifesting in his actions and decisions. He started small, adjusting his attitude and making an effort to connect genuinely with those around him. At work, Roger colleagues noticed the change. The once brash, impatient executive now listened more attentively during meetings, even seeking input from team members he had previously dismissed. One afternoon, while discussing a marketing campaign with his team, a junior employee hesitated before sharing her idea. Roger, sensing her reluctance, leaned forward with a reassuring smile. "Go ahead, Lisa. I'd like to hear what you have to say." Her idea, though unconventional, turned out to be a game changer, bringing fresh perspective to a stagnant project. The campaign was a success, and Roger made sure to credit Lisa, publicly boosting her confidence and reputation within the company. Meanwhile, Keanu continued with his life as grounded and introspective as ever. He traveled frequently, always preferring economy class, where he felt most connected to the world around him. The interactions he had with everyday people often reaffirmed his belief that kindness wasn't just a choice, but our responsibility. On a trip to Toronto, Keanu encountered a struggling bookstore owner named Margie. Her store, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city, had been her family's pride for generations. But rising rents and dwindling customers threatened its survival. Keanu, browsing the shelves, struck up a conversation with Margie. She shared her story, her voice tinged with sadness, but also resilience inspired by her determination. Keanu purchased a stack of books and left a generous tip in her donation jar. He then quietly posted about her store on his rarely used social media account. Within days, Margie's bookstore became a local sensation. Customers flooded in, eager to support her business, and as she shared her story, Mai later credited Keanu's thoughtful gesture as the turning point that saved her store months after the flight. Roger found himself reflecting on the conversation he had with Keanu. He had started to see kindness not as a weakness, but as a strength, one that required effort and courage. His transformation, while gradual, was genuine. One evening, as Roger walked through his neighborhood, he noticed a man sitting on the curb, head in his hands. The man's clothes were worn, and a small sign beside him read, "Just trying to get home, anything helps." Roger paused, the old version of himself tempted to walk past without a second thought. But Keanu's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the smallest gestures make the biggest difference. He approached the man and crouched beside him. "Hey, what's your name?" The man looked up, startled by Roger's warm tone. It's Sam. Sam, what's going on?" Roger asked, Gently, Sam explained that he had lost his job and couldn't afford a bus ticket back to his family in another state. He'd been sitting there for hours hoping for enough donations to buy a ticket. Roger didn't hesitate. He pulled out his wallet and handed Sam enough money for the ticket along with a little extra for food. "Get home safe," he said with a smile. Tears well up in Sam's eyes. "Thank you, I don't know how to pay you, you don't have to." Roger replied, "Just pay it forward when you can." As Roger walked away, he felt a sense of fulfillment that no amount of wealth or status had ever brought him. Months turned into a year, and Roger found himself traveling again for work. This time, he chose a seat in economy class, not out of necessity but out of choice. He wanted to stay connected to the lessons he had learned on a layover in New York. Roger spotted a familiar figure in the airport lounge. It was Keanu, sitting in a corner with his signature quiet demeanor reading a book. Roger hesitated for a moment before approaching Keanu. Keanu looked up and smiled, recognizing him instantly. "Roger, good to see you again." Roger sat down, his excitement evident. "I can't believe I ran into you. I've been meaning to thank you properly." "You already did," Keanu replied. "On the plane? No. I mean for more than that," Roger said earnestly. "That flight had changed me. You changed me." Keanu tilted his head slightly, listening. Roger began recounting the changes in his life, the moments of kindness he had embraced, the people he had helped, and the sense of purpose he had discovered. "I realized how much I was missing by focusing only on myself, and I wouldn't have seen it without you." Keanu's smile was modest. "That's all. You chose to see things differently. I just happened to be there," Roger chuckled. "You're too humble, but seriously, thank you." As they talked, Roger had an idea. "I've been thinking about ways to give back to make a bigger impact. What if we started something together, a foundation or a program to inspire kindness in others?" Keanu looked intrigued but thoughtful. "That's a beautiful idea, Roger, but something like that needs to come from your heart. What would it look like to you?" Roger leaned forward, excitement. "Building it could be simple acts of kindness, big or small, that ripple outwards. We could fund community projects, help struggling families, or even create a platform where people share their stories of paying it forward." Keanu nodded slowly. "I like it. Let me know how I can help." With Keanu's quiet support, Roger launched the Ripple Initiative, a nonprofit organization dedicated to spreading kindness through community-driven projects. The initiative quickly gained traction, with individuals and businesses joining the cause. Stories began pouring in of meals paid for struggling students receiving scholarships and neighborhoods coming together to help those in need. Each act, no matter how small, contributed to a growing wave of positivity. Keanu, true to his nature, remained in the background, offering guidance and occasional public support when needed. Roger, however, became the face of the initiative, using his newfound humility and passion to inspire others. One day, Roger received a letter from Sam. The man he had helped months earlier. Enclosed was a photo of Sam with his family, along with a heartfelt note. "Your kindness gave me the chance to rebuild my life. I've started a small business now, and we're doing well. Thank you for giving me hope when I had none." Roger read the letter with tears in his eyes. He shared it with Keanu during one of their meetings, and they both smiled, knowing that the ripple they had started was still growing. As Keane stood to leave, Roger extended his hand once more. "You'll never know how much this all means to me." Keanu shook his hand firmly. "You're living it, Roger. That's what matters." And with that, Keanu walked away, disappearing into the crowd as quietly as he had entered Roger's life. But the impact of his actions, the calmness in a storm, the kindness in chaos, would ripple on, touching lives in ways no one could have anticipated. Roger stood backstage at the global conference, gripping the notes he had prepared. He was no stranger to speaking engagements. His years in the corporate world had taught him how to command attention, but this time felt different. This wasn't about profits or business strategies. It was about something far more personal. The transformation of a life and the ripple effect of kindness. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. Thousands of eyes were on him, but he didn't feel nervous. He felt ready. "Good afternoon." No, Roger began, his voice steady but warm. A little over a year ago, I was on a flight that changed my life. It wasn't a first-class flight or a luxury experience. It was an ordinary trip in economy class, during which I met someone extraordinary. He paused, letting the words sink in. I didn't realize it at the time, but the man sitting next to me was none other than Keanu Reeves. Yes, the Keanu Reeves you've seen in movies and on TV. But on that, he wasn't an actor or a celebrity. He was just a fellow human being, one who chose to help others in the face of chaos. Roger went on to recount the turbulence, the fear, and how Keanu had remained calm and compassionate throughout it all. He described how that experience had forced him to confront his own arrogance and reevaluate what truly mattered. Keanu taught me something profound. Roger said, his voice growing more impassioned. Kindness isn't about grand gestures or making headlines. It's about the small, everyday choices we make to lift others up, and those small choices, they create ripples that can transform lives. He gestured toward the audience. The Ripple Initiative was born from that lesson. It's not about me or even about Keanu. It's about all of us recognizing the power we have to make a difference. The room erupted into applause as Roger concluded his speech, but as he stepped off stage, he knew this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, Keanu kept his promise to support the initiative quietly. He avoided public appearances for the organization, preferring to contribute in ways that aligned with his low-key nature, whether it was funding scholarships for students or visiting shelters anonymously. He made sure his actions spoke louder than his name. One evening, Keanu attended a small private gathering organized by Roger. It was a celebration of the initiative's milestones, attended by those whose lives had been touched by its efforts. Keanu spent the evening listening to their stories, his quiet presence encouraging them to share their experiences. A young woman approached him timidly. "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to say, thank you. Your support helped me get through college. I'm the first in my family to graduate." Keanu's smile was genuine. "That's all you did the hard work. Congratulations." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I could have done it without the scholarship. It means so much." Keanu nodded, his voice soft but firm. "Pay it forward when you can." As the Ripple Initiative gained momentum, its scope broadened. What began as small acts of kindness grew into large-scale projects rebuilding communities after natural disasters, funding mental health programs, and supporting underprivileged families. Roger, now fully dedicated to the initiative, worked tirelessly to ensure its success. He traveled extensively, meeting with local leaders and listening to the needs of communities. His efforts earned him respect and admiration, but he remained grounded, always crediting the people who inspired him. Especially Keanu's day. While visiting a school that had been rebuilt with initiative funds, Roger received a letter. It was from Walter, the elderly man he had bought coffee for in the airport months earlier. Walter wrote about how that simple gesture had reignited his faith in humanity and inspired him to volunteer at a local shelter. Roger read the letter aloud to the children at the school, ending with a message: "Never underestimate the power of kindness. It has a way of coming back to you." In his own quiet way, Keanu continued to embody the philosophy of the initiative. During one of his travels, he encountered a group of high school students raising money for their science program. They were washing cars in a parking lot, their enthusiasm evident despite the scorching sun. Keanu approached them, his baseball cap pulled low. "How's it going?" One of the students, not recognizing him, replied slow, "But we're getting there." Keanu nodded, pulling out his wallet. "I'll take a wash, and here's something extra for your program." He handed them a generous donation and watched as their faces lit up. Before leaving, he offered a simple piece of advice: "Keep working hard. You're doing something great." Months later, Roger and Keanu reunited to discuss the next steps for the Ripple Initiative over cost. Roger shared his vision for a mentorship program that would pair successful professionals with young people from underserved communities. "I want to give them the tools to create their own ripples," Roger explained. "It's not just about charity, it's about empowerment." Keanu noted thoughtfully. "I like it, but let's make sure it's accessible to everyone. No barriers." Together, they developed the program, which quickly became one of the initiative's most impactful projects. Stories of mentorship and success poured in each one, reinforcing their shared belief in the power of connection. One day, Roger received an unexpected email. It was from Sam, the man he had helped at the curb outside the airport. Sam had started his own small business employing others who had been in similar situations. His note was brief, but heartfelt. Your kindness saved my life. Now I'm trying to do the same for others. Thank you for believing in me, Roger. Forwarded the email to Keanu, adding a single line, the ripples keep growing. Keanu's reply came quickly. They always do, as the Ripple initiative grew into a global force for good. Roger and Keanu remained humble about their roles for them. The greatest reward wasn't the recognition or accolades, it was the knowledge that lives were being changed. One small act of kindness at a time. Roger often thought back to that fateful flight and the man who had shown him a better way to live. He knew he'd never fully repay the debt he felt to Keanu, but he also knew that wasn't the point. What mattered was passing the lesson on, and so the ripples continued quietly, steadily, and powerfully transforming the world. One act of kindness at a time, the Ripple initiative had grown into something neither Roger nor Keanu could have anticipated. What started as a simple mission to spread kindness had transformed into a global network of people committed to creating change each day. New stories poured in. A community rebuilding after a storm, a single mother receiving unexpected support, or a struggling student finding a mentor who believed in them. The initiative had become a movement, fueled by the belief that one small act could inspire countless others. Despite its success, the Ripple initiative faced challenges. With its rapid growth came logistical hurdles, coordinating resources, ensuring transparency, and maintaining the personal touch that made it so impactful. Roger, who had taken on the role of CEO, found himself buried in endless meetings and paperwork. The very thing that had reignited his passion for life was now threatening to overwhelm him. One evening, as Roger sat in his office poring over spreadsheets, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Keanu. Taking a break is okay. Remember why we started this? Roger leaned back in his chair, smiling at the simplicity of the message. Keanu's ability to distill complex situations into straightforward wisdom never ceased to amaze him. The next day, Roger decided to step away from the office and visit one of the initiative's projects, a shelter for homeless families in Chicago. He wanted to reconnect with the people they were helping, to remind himself of the mission's heart. The shelter was bustling. When Roger arrived, volunteers served meals, children played in a makeshift activity area, and families shared stories of resilience and hope. Roger wandered through the facility, shaking hands and listening to the people who'd benefited from the initiative. One woman, Maria, caught his attention. She was sitting at a table with her 2 young daughters, helping them with their homework. When Roger introduced himself, she smiled warmly. "You're the one who started all this?" Maria asked. "Not just me," Roger replied. "It's a team effort and a lot of people like you." Maria's smile faltered slightly. "I didn't think anyone cared about people like us. I lost my job, then my home, and for a while I thought I'd lost everything, but this place gave me a second chance." Roger nodded, his throat tightening. "You deserve that chance, and your story will inspire others." Maria looked at her daughters, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "I hope so. We want them to grow up knowing that kindness is real." Unbeknownst to Roger, Keanu had also decided to visit the shelter that day. He arrived quietly, dressed in his usual low-key attire, and began helping in the kitchen, washing dishes and preparing meals. It wasn't long before someone recognized him and whispers spread through the building. A group of teenagers approached him hesitantly. One of them, a boy named Jamal, spoke up. "Are you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu smiled, wiping his hands on a towel. "That's what they tell me." Jamal's eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you," Keanu replied, trying to help. Jamal looked down at his volunteer apron, clearly proud to be part of something bigger. "I didn't think people like you did stuff like this." Keanu crouched to Jamal's level, his voice calm but firm. "We all can. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. What matters is what you do." The words stuck with Jamal, and Heliter told his friends it was the moment he realized he wanted to be a leader in his community. As Keanu and Roger eventually crossed paths in the shelter, their reunion was marked by a shared understanding. Roger laughed as he saw Keanu in an apron still holding a dish towel, couldn't resist. Huh, Roger teased. Keanu shrugged. Sometimes the best way to help is to get your hands dirty. They spent the afternoon talking with families, volunteers, and staff. By the end of the visit, Roger felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that while managing the initiative was important, staying connected to its core, the people it served, was what truly mattered. Inspired by their visit, Roger and Keanu brainstormed, formed a new program within the Ripple Initiative. They called it Groundwork, a project focused on empowering local leaders to create change in their own communities. The idea was simple: provide resources, mentorship, and funding to individuals who had the vision but lacked the means to make a difference. The first Groundwork project launched in Detroit, where a former teacher named Carla wanted to open a community center for at-risk youth with support. From the initiative, Carla transformed an abandoned building into a vibrant hub for education, art, and mentorship. The center quickly became a cornerstone of the neighborhood, changing the lives of countless children and their families. As Groundwork gained traction, the media began to take notice. Reporters clamored for interviews with Roger and Keanu, eager to understand the driving force behind their efforts. While Roger agreed to speak publicly, Keanu remained true to his nature, avoiding the spotlight whenever possible. One journalist during a televised interview with Roger asked, "What's the secret to your success?" Roger paused, his mind flashing back to that fateful flight. "It's not about success," he said, "it's about impact, and the secret is simple kindness." The clip went viral, sparking a wave of support for the initiative. Donations poured in, and more communities joined the Groundwork program, eager to create ripples of their own. The Ripple Initiative expanded globally, reaching countries in need of disaster relief, education programs, and health care support in India. It funded a clean water project for rural villages in Brazil. It helped establish safe shelters for women and children in Kenya. It provided solar panels to schools, ensuring students could study after dark. Keanu, ever the quiet force behind the movement, traveled to many of these locations anonymously. His actions inspired volunteers, but he always redirected praise to the communities themselves. "This isn't about me," often said, "it's about us, all of us working together." Years later, Roger stood on the stage of another conference. This time addressing a younger audience, he spoke of the initiative's achievements, but more importantly, he emphasized the small beginnings that led to such profound change. "I never imagined that one flight, one moment could change everything," he said. "But that's the beauty of kindness. It grows, it spreads, and it connects us in ways we can't always see." In the audience, Keanu sat quietly, nodding as he listened. He knew that the movement they had built was far bigger than either of them. It was a legacy rooted in compassion, humility, and the belief that every action, no matter how small, mattered. As the crowd rose to its feet in applause, Roger and Keanu exchanged a knowing glance. The ripples they had started continued to grow, touching lives and inspiring change long after the initial wave. And in that moment, both men knew their work was far from over. Years had passed since the Ripple Initiative had taken its first steps, and the impact it had created was nothing short of extraordinary. It was no longer just a non-profit organization. It had evolved into a global force, uniting individuals, businesses, and communities under one simple yet profound idea. Kindness has the power to transform the world. Sitting in his office, overlooking a bustling cityscape, Roger often found himself reflecting on how far he had come. The man who once measured success by wealth and status was now driven by stories of hope and resilience. His desk was cluttered with letters, photographs, and tokens of gratitude from people whose lives had been touched by the initiative. One letter in particular caught his eye. It was from a young boy in Detroit, a participant in one of the Groundwork programs. The boy, named Malik, wrote about how the community center had given him a place to study, make friends, and dream of a brighter future. "I want to be like you when I grow up," the letter concluded. "Someone who helps others." Roger smiled, his chest tightening with emotion. He had started this journey thinking he would give back to others, but the truth was, he had gained more than he could ever give. Keanu's life had also continued in its quiet, unassuming way. He had never sought recognition for his role in the initiative, preferring to remain a shadowy figure in the background. His travels took him to some of the most remote corners of the world, where he worked alongside local leaders to support their efforts. In a small village in Nepal, Keanu helped build a school, working side by side with villagers to lay bricks and mix cement. When a reporter who had somehow tracked him down asked why he was there, Keanu simply replied, "Because I can be." His humility and sincerity resonated deeply with everyone he met. Stories of his anonymous contributions began to surface, inspiring countless others to follow his example. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Ripple Initiative, Roger and the team organized a global summit, inviting partners, volunteers, and beneficiaries to share their stories, held in a massive convention center. The event brought together people from over 50 countries. The energy in the room was palpable, as attendees exchanged ideas and experiences. There were presentations on innovative community projects, testimonials from individuals whose lives had been transformed, and panel discussions on the future of the initiative. Keanu, as expected, avoided the spotlight. He attended quietly, sitting among the crowd and listening intently to each speaker. But when Roger took the stage and called his name, the room erupted in applause. Keanu stood reluctantly, nodding in acknowledgement, but he made no move toward the stage. Instead, he motioned for Roger to continue, a small smile playing on his lips. It was a moment that perfectly encapsulated his character. Present but self-effacing, always direct in attention toward the cause rather than himself. During the summit, one speaker's story stood out. It was told by Carla, the former teacher from Detroit who had launched the first groundwork project. She spoke about how the community center had not only provided a safe space for children, but it also sparked a cultural renaissance in the neighborhood. Kids who used to skip school are now excelling in their classes, Carla said, her voice trembling with emotion. Parents who felt powerless now have a support system, and all of this started because someone believed in me. She paused, looking directly at Roger and Keanu. Your kindness created a ripple that has touched thousands of lives. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. The room erupted into a standing ovation. But Keanu remained seated, clapping softly and smiling. He knew the true credit belonged to people like Carla, leaders who turned small opportunities into monumental change. After the summit, Roger and Keanu met privately to discuss the future of the initiative. They had accomplished so much, but both men knew there was still more to do. I've been thinking, Roger began, leaning forward in his chair. What if we focus on education next? Not just building schools, but creating leadership programs for young people. Teach them how to lead with kindness. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. Education is the foundation of everything. If we can teach the next generation to value empathy and compassion, the ripples will continue long after we're gone. The idea took root, and within months, the Ripple Initiative launched its most ambitious project, Yet Kind Leaders. This global program aimed to identify young leaders from underserved communities, provide them with scholarships, and mentor them in the principles of ethical leadership. The flagship campus of Kind Leaders, called the Ripple Academy, was built in Nairobi, Kenya. It became a hub for students from across Africa, offering courses in leadership, sustainability, and community development. The program emphasized practical skills and character, building with graduates committing to return to their communities and create positive change. One of the first graduates, a young woman named Amina, shared her journey during the Academy's inaugural ceremony. She spoke about growing up in a small village with limited opportunities and how the Ripple Academy had given her the tools to start a women's cooperative. Before this, I never thought I could be a leader, Amina said, her voice steady but emotional. Now, I'm not just leading, I'm empowering others. To lead. Keanu, who attended the ceremony anonymously, watched from the back of the crowd. He felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing the movement was evolving in ways neither he nor Roger could have imagined. Years later, Roger and Keanu found themselves on another flight together. This time, they were en route to a small village in South America, where the initiative was funding a clean water project. As the plane soared above the clouds, Roger glanced at Keanu, who was reading a worn Paperback, do you ever think about how this all started? Roger asked. Keanu looked up, his eyes thoughtful. All the time, one flight, one moment. It's incredible how much can grow from something so small. Roger nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. You know, I used to think success was about what you could take from the world. Now I know it's about what you can give. Keanu closed his book, his expression serene. That's the ripple. It's not about us. It's about everyone we touch and everyone they touch in. Turn as the plane descended, the two men sat in comfortable silence, knowing their work was far from over. The ripples they had started continued to grow, stretching across oceans and generations, and somewhere in a quiet corner of the world, another act of kindness was waiting to begin. The quiet village in South America, where Roger and Keanu arrived, was nestled between lush green mountains and a winding river. The project they were visiting, a clean water initiative, was one of the many funded by the Ripple Initiative. The goal was simple yet profound: to provide safe, drinkable water to communities that had struggled without it for generations. As the two men stepped off the dusty bus that brought them into the heart of the village, they were greeted by a crowd of smiling locals. Children ran barefoot through the streets, their laughter echoing against the clay houses. Women carried woven baskets filled with fruit, and men waved from their work on the water system's final stages of construction. Roger took a deep breath, marveling at the energy of the place. You can feel it, he said to Keanu. Hope it's everywhere. Keanu nodded, his gaze scanning the bustling scene. This is what it's all about. The village leader, an elderly man named Mato, approached them with a warm smile. His weathered face told a story of decades spent fighting for his community's survival. Bienvenidos, Mato said, shaking their hands firmly. You've traveled far to be here, and we are deeply grateful. Roger smiled, replying, in his best Spanish, It's an honor to see the impact of your hard work. Mato laughed, his eyes twinkling. Know me, friends, this is the result of all of us working together. Your kindness brought us the tools, but it is our hands that have built this. Keanu, always preferring to listen, nodded respectfully. And you've done incredible work. Mato gestured for them to follow, leading them to the riverbank where the new filtration system had been installed. Workers were adding the finishing touches, ensuring that clean water would soon flow into the village the next morning. The entire village gathered for the grand opening of the clean water system. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as Mato addressed the crowd from a makeshift stage. Today, Mato began, his voice strong despite his age. We celebrate more than clean water. We celebrate unity, perseverance, and the kindness of strangers who believed in us. The crowd erupted into cheers, and children waved handmade signs thanking the Ripple Initiative. Roger stood beside Keanu, moved by the overwhelming gratitude in the air. When it was time to cut the ribbon, Mato called both men to the stage. You may not think of yourselves as heroes, Mato said, but to us, you are. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. This isn't about us, it's about what people can do when they come together. The real heroes are standing right here. You, your families, your children. This is your legacy. The applause that followed was deafening as the festivities continued. A young girl named Lua approached Roger shyly, clutching a piece of paper. She couldn't have been older than 9, but her eyes sparkled with a wisdom beyond her ears. Sior, she said, handing him the paper. I made this for you. Roger unfolded the paper to reveal a colorful drawing of the village, with clean water flowing through it. In the center of the picture, a figure stood holding a heart clearly meant to be him. This is beautiful, Lucha, Roger said, crouching to her level. Thank you. Lua smiled. When I grow up, I want to help people too, like you and Sior. Keanu, Roger's throat tightened. You already are, Lucha. You're part of something big. Keanu, who had been listening nearby, knelt down beside them. You'll do amazing things, he told Lucia. Just remember, even the smallest actions can make the biggest ripples. Lucia nodded solemnly, as though committing the words to memory. Later that day, as Roger and Keanu prepared to leave, Mato invited them to his home for tea. The small clay house was modest, but filled with warmth, with handmade decorations lining the walls. As they sat around a wooden table, Matto shared a story that surprised them both. Many years ago, he began, when I was a young man. I worked in a city far from here. Life was hard and I often went hungry. One day a stranger saw me sitting on the curb looking lost. He gave me enough money for a meal and a bus ticket back home. Roger's eyes widened, the memory suddenly vivid in his mind. Matto, what city was this, Matto? Mild, it was New York. I never forgot that man's kindness. It was a small act, but it brought me home. Roger's breath caught. That man was May. Matteo's eyes widened in recognition as he studied Roger's face. You were that stranger. Roger nodded, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't think much of it at the time, but hearing what it meant to you, Matto, this is incredible. Matto reached across the table, gripping Roger's hand. Your kindness saved me then and now. It has brought clean water to my people. Life truly is a circle, as they said their goodbyes. Roger and Keanu both felt the weight of what they had just learned. The ripple effect they had always spoken about wasn't just an abstract concept. It was tangible, living proof of how one act of kindness could resonate across years and continents on the plane or home. Roger turned to Keanu, his voice filled with, "How can you believe it? Something I did decades ago led to this moment." Keanu smiled, his gaze thoughtful. That's the thing about ripples. You never know where they'll go or who they'll touch back in the United States. Roger shared the story of Matto at the next Ripple Initiative board. Meeting the tale inspired everyone in the room, fueling their determination to expand the organizations, reach even further. The story was also shared publicly, going viral. Almost overnight, people from all walks of life began sharing their own Ripple stories, flooding social media with tales of kindness that had changed their lives. The movement took on a life of its own, with schools, companies, and communities joining in to create their own ripples for Keanu. The experience reaffirmed everything he had believed about life and humanity. One evening, as he sat in his quiet home, he wrote in his journal, habit he had kept for years. We are all connected in ways we can't always see. Every choice, every action sends out ripples that touch lives far beyond our own. If we choose kindness, those ripples can change the world. As he closed the journal, Keanu felt a deep sense of peace. The work wasn't finished, it never would be. But that was the beauty of it. Every ripple was part of something greater, a never-ending wave of hope and possibility, and somewhere in a quiet village in South America, clean water flowed for the first time, carrying with it the promise of a brighter future. The momentum of the Ripple Initiative reached unprecedented heights. News outlets, social media platforms, and even global leaders took notice of how one simple philosophy, rooted in kindness, was reshaping the world. But while the movement grew, beyond Roger and Keanu's wildest dreams, both men remained focused on the quiet, transformative power of individual actions. One evening, as Roger reviewed the latest updates from groundwork in the Ripple Academy, he found himself restless. The stories of impact were inspiring, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As much as the initiative had grown, he wondered if it could reach people who were disconnected from the movement, those who might not yet believe in the power of kindness. Later that week, during one of their regular conversations, Roger brought up his thoughts to Keanu. I've been thinking, Roger began, swirling his coffee. What if we could take the Ripple Initiative to the next level, something that doesn't just support communities but inspires people in real time on a global scale? Keanu raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you have in mind? An event, Roger said, his eyes lighting up. Something interactive where people from all over the world can participate in acts of kindness simultaneously. A global ripple. Keanu leaned back, considering the idea. A day of action. Exactly, Roger said, ice excitement building. We could call it World Ripple Day, a single day where millions of people commit to one act of kindness. Imagine the impact. Keanu nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. I like it, let's make it happen. The planning for World Ripple Day began immediately. The idea was simple but ambitious. Inspire individuals, schools, businesses, and governments to dedicate one day to kindness. Whether it was helping a neighbor, volunteering at a shelter, or simply reaching out to someone in need, every action would contribute to a wave of positivity. The campaign spread like wildfire. Celebrities, influencers, and world leaders lent their voices to the cause. Social media platforms partnered with the initiative, creating special tools for people to share their acts of kindness. Schools introduced lesson plans about empathy and compassion, while corporations pledged to give employees time off to participate. Keanu, true to form, avoided the spotlight during the campaign. Instead, he focused on smaller efforts, personally reaching out to grassroots organizations and encouraging their participation. Roger, however, took on the role of the movement's public face, appearing on talk shows and news programs to spread the message. "This isn't just about one day," Roger explained during an interview. "It's about starting habits. If we can inspire people to act on kindness today, maybe they'll keep doing it tomorrow, and the day after that, on the morning of World RI Day." The world woke up to an extraordinary sight. News channels and social media feeds were flooded with stories of kindness from every corner of the globe. In Tokyo, a group of commuters organized a pop-up coffee station at a train station, offering free drinks to passengers rushing to work. In Cape Town, volunteers planted community gardens in neighborhoods that had been neglected for years. In New York, strangers paid for each other's meals at diners and cafes. Roger spent the day visiting local initiatives, while Keanu quietly joined a volunteer group in Los Angeles serving meals to the homeless. Neither of them sought recognition, but their hearts swelled as they watched the world come together in ways they had only dreamed of. One of the most touching moments came from a small village in South America, the same village where Roger and Keanu had helped launch the Clean Water Project. Children there created handmade thank you cards and sent them to other communities in need, spreading the ripple forward. By the end of the day, World Ripple Day had become the most trending topic on social media. People from all walks of life shared their experiences, reflecting on how even the smallest gestures had made a difference. One post read, "I helped my elderly neighbor carry her groceries today. It took 5 minutes, but she told me it made her whole week." World Ripple Day. Another said, "My family decided to cook meals for our local shelter. It was such a small thing, but seeing the smiles on people's faces reminded me how powerful kindness can be." Roger and Keanu, though exhausted, couldn't stop smiling as they scrolled through the stories. The ripples were no longer just an idea. They were a movement that had truly gone global. That evening, Keanu returned to his quiet home, reflecting on the day's events. He thought about the countless lives touched by the initiative, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. Along the way, he opened his journal and began to write. Kindness isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention or seek recognition. It moves, quietly touching one life then another until it becomes something unstoppable. Today reminded me that even in a world filled with noise, kindness can still be heard. In the weeks following World Ripple Day, the momentum didn't fade. Instead, it grew stronger. People continued sharing their stories, inspiring others to act. Schools adopted kindness programs as part of their curriculum, and businesses launched initiatives to support their communities year-round. Roger and Keanu realized they had tapped into something far greater than they had imagined. Kindness, once thought of as a simple virtue, was now seen as a powerful force for change, a way to connect people, build the fabric of society. During a meeting with the Ripple Initiative, Team Roger proposed a bold new goal to make World Ripple Day an annual tradition. The team unanimously agreed, knowing it had the potential to leave an indelible mark on the world years later. As Roger and Keanu reflected on their journey, they were struck by how far the ripples had traveled from a single flight to a global movement. The initiative had proven that even the smallest actions could create waves of change. Sitting on a park bench one sunny afternoon, Roger turned to Keanu. "Do you ever wonder what the world would look like if everyone believed in kindness?" Keanu smiled, his eyes thoughtful. "I think we're starting to see it." A group of children ran past them, laughing and playing. One of them paused, noticing the two men, and smiled brightly. "Thank you," the child said simply before running off again. Roger chuckled. "Looks like the ripples are still going. They always will," Keanu replied, "as long as someone chooses to start them." And with that, the two men sat in comfortable silence, knowing their work had become something far greater than themselves. an infinite ripple spreading hope and kindness across the world.